Hello and welcome to PlayStation Rumble, a video game podcast where each episode we don our critical caps and traverse backwards through the passage of time to remark upon remarkable games. My name is Jamie, and joining me, as always, he's never lonely because he loves Sony. It's Tony.
Yo.
And on the podcast equivalent of my right, the comedic heel from the Outtakes Reel, it's Mr. Neal.
Hello.
It is episode 2, and in this episode we are going to be continuing our journey through the bizarre world that is Deadly Premonition. We've had some fantastic feedback from episode 1, and I think if it's shown me anything, it's that for a game that got mixed critical reception and undersold initially, it certainly has a very passionate and robust community, even to this day.
Thank you for the feedback.
Before we get into that, I want to know how your weeks have been. Neal, how's your week been?
Well, I did a little bit of shopping around Halloween. I managed to get the non-Halloweeny Saints Row 3 remaster.
Nice.
I also got a 2-for-1 of Days Gone and Schoolgirl Zombie Hunter, I think Jamie's favorite.
You're saying that? You're literally the person that's bought it.
Yeah, so I got that as a 2-for-1.
It's a classic.
So, yeah, well, I mean, who doesn't love a game where you play as a Japanese schoolgirl shooting violent weapons?
Who indeed? So out of those three, have you played all 3 of them?
I've finished Saints Row 3, and I've started Schoolgirl Zombie Hunter. I've dabbled a little bit with Days Gone just to sort of get a feel for it.
How is Saints Row 3 is a game that I literally bought about 3 months ago. Sometimes I get this like burning urge to like get a game, like a specific game, and it's not even usually a new game. It's like a game that like is a few years old. I literally have to have this. I went to literally like a video game shop. Do you remember when we had shops where we bought video games from? I went into one of those. I bought it the same day because I was like, I'm playing this. And I couldn't because it's got a very low dead zone for the analog stick, and I kept getting drift. But how is it?
Well,
it looks really fun.
I do remember video game shops because that's where I bought Days Gone and Schoolgirl Zombie Hunter.
You couldn't just buy Zombie Hunter. You can't just go up to the counter of Schoolgirl Zombie Hunter. You've got to have Days Gone over the top of it to like...
Saints Row 3 is great because we talked about the GTA remaster on the last episode, and then I saw Saints Row 3 and it was very cheap, and I had that itch to play something sort of akin to that, and I saw Saints Row 3 and I was like, this will do. And it scratched that itch perfectly. It's great. It's wonderful.
That is exactly why I bought it. I just thought I want a silly open world game where I can just like have fun shooting mechanics and like just go a bit silly with it. And when I started playing it, I think that's like exactly what it delivered. Because did you buy the sort of PS4? It's got all the DLC. Like you start off with like stupid like cars and outfits, and so you're already like that was nearly a bit like overwhelming. You're like kind of given all this stuff at the beginning, and the sort of set pieces are really kind of cool and a bit like self-referential and not being very serious about it. I think there's OG fans that like 1 and 2, and then some people thought 3 got a bit silly. I think 4 like completely goes off the rail. You have like superpowers, you're the president. But I think for me, 3 is probably that right balance between like, I don't know, having a plot, but also just mainly going, this is a video game and you're going to have fun.
Well, it's funny because after I finished 3, I played Saints Row 4, which I had never played. And I agree with you. Saints Row does a better balance of the serious and the silly. I mean, Saints Row 4 is so over the top that I'm not surprised it did a reboot, but the reboot looks awful.
Do you know what? I think there's a lot of potential for that game, and until it's in my hands, I'm not going to worry if it's going to be good or bad. Tony, have you ever played any Saints Row?
I played 3. It's all right. I really don't care about the remake.
I would ask you about Zombie Girls. I feel like we probably know everything we need to, it's in the name, isn't it?
The closest I played to something like that is Lollipop Chainsaw, the Suda 51 game. I'm a big Suda fan, so more or less it's no more heroes, but it's all right.
Have any of you played the Onichambara games?
No.
I know of them. I've never played them.
So apparently it's a spin-off of that, which I didn't know until after I got it. But
what, Lollipop Chainsaw?
No, the Schoolgirl Zombie Hunter.
Well, who develops that? It's not Sega, is it?
No, it's not Sega. It was D3 Publishing, but there's another Japanese company. I can't remember who it is.
Okay. So Days Gone, you've dabbled. It's not, I don't know, it's not seen as a Sony darling, is it?
I remember purchasing it when it first came out, and I really liked it. I liked it so much, in fact, that I bought it for my friend for his birthday.
Okay, so you're a fan.
I didn't end up beating it, but I remember it being, I enjoyed my time of it. I thought it was fun, flaws and all. I'm disappointed I didn't get that sequel that everyone was hoping for.
I feel like it's gotten a bit of a groundswell of support over the last maybe 6 months, maybe a year since it's come out. Since it's been patched and sort of worked on, I feel like it's gotten a bit of a bolster to its reputation. And then the director was all snippy and was like, well, you should have bought it when it came out. That's why it's not getting a sequel.
Should have bought it for £60. Yeah. I've only seen, I'm watching my brother play through it, and it really feels like this is your AAA, open world, paint by numbers game. It's like, we're going to try and, Tony's not agreeing with me. We're going to try and sort of, okay, Tony agrees with me. And I just felt like, here's The Last of Us and Assassin's Creed, sort of mushed together in a sort of, I don't know, it just didn't, none of the characters felt particularly well fleshed out. I didn't care about any of them.
So you're saying The Last of Us is paint by numbers, which I agree with.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is they've just gone... I don't agree with
that at all, actually.
What they've said is we're going to have a big conversation about that one day. It's just gone, here's the things that is expected from a AAA, these certain graphics, these sort of structures and missions, this sort of weapon. It's just literally like bringing absolutely nothing new to the table.
So it's The Last of Us.
Are you talking about the original Last of Us?
Yes.
You think the original Last of Us brought nothing to the table?
Nothing new.
One of the up
you
until
don't
that point,
always have to bring something completely new to the table to still be a great experience.
Yes, but then either you bring something new to the table or you do something really well. I think that makes you stand out.
You know how with movies that they do certain kinds of movies like period dramas, and they call them the equivalent of Oscar bait. That's what The Last of Us is for games.
I disagree with that 100%.
For its time, The Last of Us was the best narrative, well, at least one of the best narrative experiences you could get in gaming.
No.
What it did with environmental storytelling, what it did with music, what it did with cinematography. Neal, I'm dying on this hill.
It's like they had a checklist. They had a checklist, and they're like, how can we win gaming awards? And we have to include this element, check. This element, check. They had a checklist.
No, they had a vision. Do you know how much more risky The Last of Us was compared to the Uncharted series? Very safe, same story, big, AAA popcorn in the mouth, blockbuster. The Last of Us, how much they had to protest just to have Joel, just to have Ellie as a main, as a female character on, the publishing company didn't even want to or the advertising market didn't want that to happen because it's like, oh, it's not going to sell as much because you got a female on the cover.
It's not even a female. She's a minor, and spoiler alert, towards the end of the game, she did some brutal things.
It's incredible. If you don't care, did you not care about the characters in that game now?
No.
My God, you're dead inside.
I thought the relationship between the two of them was incredibly forced and not believable.
What?
Have you played number 2?
No.
I don't know.
No. I saw the leaks. When I saw the leaks,
this, folks, and continue this another episode, because this is a whole new episode.
When I saw the leaks for number 2, I looked at everything that was going on.
I've avoided it so far.
Number 2 yet.
I looked at everything and I just started laughing, and I was like, I don't even need to play. I never had any intention of playing it anyway, but I just laughed out loud when I saw what they did with number 2.
Neal, will you say on the record, The Last of Us, that Days Gone is a better game than The Last of Us?
I can't say that because I haven't played Days Gone yet.
And nor should you ever. Moving on.
I will say from first impressions, yes, it is.
That's a bold statement. But that's your opinion, and I will respect that, and I will leave it at that for the moment.
Send your hate mail to PlayStationRumblePodcast@gmail.com.
And direct it to Neal. Tony, what's going on in your week?
I kind of started replaying Hotline Miami.
Any good?
You ever played that game before?
No.
The soundtrack alone is probably one of the best soundtracks of any game I've ever played. Very like new wave-ish, but kind of modernized 80s synthesized sound, and that's very much my thing. Synthwave, cruising down the Miami streets at night with like, the neon lights and melting your face off music. I just fucking love it. The game is insane for a over the top game. Is very, very violent.
Good. I'm glad.
It's violent, but it's kind of like a puzzle more than a run and gun. Because if you run and gun, you're gonna get murdered. But if you kind of have to learn how to get through every area in a different way, it's definitely a game I'd like to cover. If it's just covering like independent games, it's one of those games where has a soundtrack that kind of just draws you into the experience.
Yeah, I mean, some games, for whatever it is, for their general mood, for the soundtrack, they just like elicit that feeling within inside you, and that experience is good enough, regardless of how good the game is. But yeah, I'm glad to hear it.
I would like to, like I said, I would like to one day cover it, even if we cover smaller independent games.
We will just after The Last of Us. We'll try that out.
So, Jamie, how has your week been?
Thank you for asking. My week's been good. I've been buying things again. Who bought a PlayStation Classic?
I actually, when it was first announced, I actually was able to pre-order one. Then rumors about it started coming out and more news about it started coming out, and then I quickly canceled the pre-order.
Two things that really upset the sales of that is, A, they used really poor emulation for it. Some of it was PAL version, which is fine for me because I literally live in the PAL region. But for Americans, they were like, why is this game 18% slower? Because they actually had to slow games down for PAL region because of the way the frames and the way our sort of TVs worked. And secondly, the games weren't that impressive on it. There was 20 games. Some of them were great. Some of them were okay. Some of them were very questionable. I bought a Classic a while ago, and this week I bought a True Blue Mini Crackhead Pack Edition.
I know what those are.
What?
Yes. Metal Jesus Rocks has just talked about these on his video. I'd seen them a while ago, actually. And what they are is USBs with preloaded, emulated ROMs. Probably, I'm imagining, quite poor versions of PlayStation games. So the Crackhead Pack comes with 100 games that you can just stick into your PlayStation Classic. And it's I don't have the technical time or patience or skill to emulate well, but if I can buy a USB stick and just stick it in and it gives me 100 games, I'm quite happy for that.
How much did you pay for the USB stick?
It was 20, I think it was £20, probably £25 after thing. But some of the things I'm excited to play on it. It has Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I've never played that. It's got the Crash Bandicoot games, don't worry, I own them already.
Ooh.
Croc 2, who could say no? Dino Crisis 2, yes, thank you.
Yes.
Final Fantasy Origins 4, Tactics 5, 6, 8. It's fine because 7 is already on the PlayStation Classic as a standard.
8 is trash.
Ooh, some people would disagree, but I'm sure
they're wrong.
Well, I mean, the best Final Fantasy,
all opinions.
The best Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy VI. No, that's a hill I'll die on.
Final Fantasy VIII is the Last of Us of JRPGs.
That could be a pretty high standard to someone who may enjoy The Last of Us.
Gran Turismo 1 and 2. Hogs of War, fantastic game, don't worry about it. Medieval, which probably isn't actually that good. What are some of the other?
That's going to be a very controversial comment, I think.
I mean, come on. The remaster came out and everyone was like, yeah, it doesn't matter.
It has a following, I think.
All right, we'll do an episode.
They're fun. I mean, they're not like...
I think they're fun. They haven't aged in the way that... Sorry, go on, Neal.
They're better than Crash. They're better than Crash!
How dare you? How absolutely dare you?
I don't like Crash, but I like Crash 2. That's as far as I go with Crash Bandicoot.
Jesus, play CTR. Oddworld, Parappa the Rapper, why not?
Parappa's fantastic.
Yeah, Persona 2.
Persona, which one? Eternal Punishment?
Yeah, and number 1 is on the...
it's on the Classic.
It's on the classic, so I just need number 3 now. That's the only one missing from my library, which I do want to
I mean, if you have a Vita, you might as well play the remake they made for the Vita. Persona 2?
Persona 3. Yes, I should, yes.
Persona 2, because the Persona 2 and the PS1 is... I tried playing it a long time ago, and it's pretty rough by today's standards.
I imagine it being a bit old-fashioned. Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, Nemesis, everyone's favourite. Simpsons Wrestling, can never have too many copies of Simpsons Wrestling. All 3 Spyros. It's got Siphon Filters, big fan of those in the day. All the Tekkens. Tekku's Stealth Assassin, the ninja.
Tenchu.
Fantastic. Tenchu, Stealth Assassin. Yeah, very good. 3 Tomb Raiders, Tomba. They're very expensive for some bizarre reason. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, Wipeout, Twisted Metal 2. I'm really happy with that. I'm going to be playing a lot of PlayStation 1 in the next few weeks. So I'm excited about that. We're not, sponsored by them in any sort of weird way. I just, I saw it on Metal Jesus Rocks video and I thought, that is actually probably a good idea. And that is how my week has been. Yeah,
the classic is something I wish I'd bought when I think they were selling them for like $20 or $30 here.
I think they still are.
They never went that low when I saw. I went to Target, had like an entire wall of them, and I went there like a couple months later, even like a year later, and it's still the same one sitting there.
Okay, so with that, we are going to go on to our next segment. What's new? We've just had about last week, we had the State of Play. Generally quite low enthusiasm about the State of Play. Neal, overall, how did you feel about it?
Nothing groundbreaking. I am excited for one game.
Okay, I'm excited to hear what that game is. Tony, how did you feel about the State of Play? Tony hasn't watched it.
I didn't watch it, but I read about it.
Have you seen the highlights? Yeah.
I read about the highlights, and I do not remember any of the highlights, which probably shows how interested I was in the highlights.
All right, this is what I'm going to say about it. A lot of people in the retro gaming community go, it's not as good as like back in the PS1, PS2 days. We'd have like loads of games, lots of different genres. Not everything was like a big AAA blockbuster. And then when we get a showcase full of diverse, interesting, non-AAA games, people are like, oh yeah, but where's all the sort of first party blockbusters? This is what I want to see more in State of Plays, to be honest. Like, just interesting looking games. They're not going to be for everyone. They're not going to hit for everyone. But, there's only so many times you can just sort of see Horizon and God of War and stuff like that. I thought this was, for me, quite a good lineup.
I think the reason why some people were disappointed was because it's so close to the holiday that we're expecting maybe something like really big in it.
But I mean, we know what the next big PlayStation hits are. They're going to be God of War. They're going to be Spider-Man 2. Is Spider-Man 2 being announced? Yeah, Spider-Man 2. And they're going to be Horizon. We know what's that. It's like some people are saying, oh, it wasn't good enough. Like, literally, these are the games out at the moment. What do you want them to do? Just fathom new games out of nowhere?
Like I said, I can understand why people were disappointed. I wasn't interested in anything really, but I'm not going to say it was good or bad. I just wasn't into it. But I can see why people were like, oh, they were expecting something bigger, maybe a surprise announcement, because we're right around the holiday season. We're right around the holiday season.
The games that were presented at the State of Play were Little Devil Inside.
Yeah.
I mean, very stylistic, very interesting. I would give that a go.
Yeah.
From Neal. Bugsnax, look, we'd all love to have a PS5. None of us do.
Trash.
You haven't even played it.
Utter trash.
I think it's another reason, because weren't there a lot of PS5 announcements in the State of Play?
I think a lot of them were like joint PS4 and PS5. Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. Anyone played Five Nights at Freddy's?
Don't care.
My friends' kids do, and I don't care about it.
That's the main audience for Five Nights at Freddy's. It's just literally like 9-year-olds who... It's become massive with kids. But again, if you're into that, exciting. Star Ocean, The Divine Force, not looking too great.
That is the one I'm excited for.
I mean, I know why people are excited for the franchise, but I think people had issues with the trailer.
Well, I'll wait and see. I always root for a Star Ocean game to be good. They don't always turn out to be good, but I always hope.
Okay, and this next one, I think this is the one they sort of advertised as going to be like one of the higher ones to sort of set the bar of like, this is what you can kind of expect. Death's Door is coming to PlayStation. Death's Door looks like it's worth having a go.
Yeah.
Neal, I know you're going to play it because it's a video game.
I mean, I own a lot of games, but I'm not going to buy every video game, Jamie.
He has about half of them already, Jamie. He doesn't need any more.
Death's Door looks really stylistic. People genuinely people enjoy it. I haven't played it.
Is that the time loop game?
Yes. Which is the season of the year, isn't it? Deathverse, although that's not my jam, very stylistic. Looks right if that's what you're into.
Yeah.
From Neal. Well, this will excite you then. King of Fighters 15 beta starts next month. First Class Trouble is like what looks like a Among Us, but with sort of more sort of 3D third-person graphics.
Wank.
It looks like what's that film? Murder on the Freight Train. Who knows what I'm talking about?
Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah, Murder on the Orient Express. It looks like a version between that and Among Us. Yeah, I mean, it'll go, won't it? We Are OFK is obviously trying to skew to a younger audience. It has, I mean, it's not too badly written. There is humour in there.
Yeah.
Neal's going to get it. He's got the pre-order. And that was our offering. I liked it, but I wasn't expecting too much from it. So with that, we're going to go to our main section. But before we head on to our conversation about Deadly Premonition, a few things to note. We have talked about this game for a very long time. Initially, we were hoping it would be a 2-parter. It's actually going to be a 3-parter with the 3rd episode coming out on the 29th because you just can't rush a good cup of coffee. Secondly, we've had some trouble with the audio. So Neal is going to sound not his best, which he loves sounding, but unfortunately, we've had to use some backup copies. Apart from that, sit back and enjoy part 2 of Deadly Premonition.
Previously during the investigation.
For the record, I was fighting for Fatal Frame, but Jamie said Japanese girl, haunted house, no thanks.
He says to the girl that this is an important story, but a little scary. I don't know why he would tell her this story.
Are flies like a theme in this game? Is there like a weird thing as you're going, why are there so many...
You just get the record straight. I bought a fucking 360 for this goddamn game.
Do you not have squirrels in England?
We do have squirrels. I do not have an encyclopedic knowledge of squirrels.
At times, we must purge things from this world because they should not exist, even if it means losing someone that you love.
Episode 2, we wake up in the hotel and we leave the room and we are met by Forrest Kaysen.
FK.
I'm not clocking that at all at this point. What I am clocking is his name is Forrest Kaysen and he sells trees. I mean, they're beating you over the head with it at this point. How did we feel about Forrest?
Has anybody played Spy Fiction?
No. It's another sweary game. You're right?
That's right. It is sweary. I think it's his first game. And it came out on the PS2. And it also has a character named Forrest Kaysen.
Oh, wow.
And also, speaking of his other games, I think, was it D4 has a character with the same name?
Yes.
So I think it's just a recurring character name he uses.
Which is quite interesting because later on we will see in the plot that he hangs around for a bit in the timeline, maybe more than you'd expect. So maybe that's a bit of a little hint to that. He sells these small red trees. This whole red tree theme has sort of been going since we saw the crime scene where Anna was sort of tied to a tree. It was in a red tree. We keep having these dreams in this kind of like red forest place. And then we meet Forrest Kaysen, FK, who sells red trees, and he's the only one that knows how to make these seeds sprout. I'm not getting this I'm not clocking it at this point. Do you remember the first time you played it? Did you get it then?
I didn't get any of this
Immediately.
I was still, I think, taking it all in as I was playing it. Even this time, like, I knew everything that happens. I did not catch. I knew there was something about him. I forgot what it was, and I didn't remember it until until it was the grand scheme came out.
No, it's FK holding a red tree. It's practically like showing you a piece of paper saying, "This is the killer."
Yeah. No, you are right. And if there ever was a murder, I really hope you would be the one out of the three of us investigating it. And then we go to meet Anna. And then we go to try to meet Diane in the art gallery. And we're meeting Diane because she is a woman who is known for having stilettos and could be Miss Stilettos. But when we first get to the art gallery, what's the art gallery called? Muse Gallery?
I think so. I can't remember.
We, instead of meeting Diane, we see in the lobby Olivia. And there's two things of note. A, that this art gallery is stuffed full of pictures of trees. It is literally just an art gallery of trees. And there's just been a big tree murder.
It is the Pacific Northwest, which is basically all trees.
Am I just being culturally insensitive by noting that as a strange thing, that she's got a completely only tree art gallery?
No, that is a little weird.
I thought it was a plot point that it was just at the time, that was like the theme of the gallery or whatever. That was like the theme of the showing that she was having. It was all tree based.
Yes, I think that's probably like the in-house explanation for that. And we meet Olivia looking at one of these pictures, and she seems quite nervous, and we suspect that she might have an ulterior motive. And she says, no, and I've got a quote here, "I like trees," which made me laugh. And then we overhear Carol and Diane arguing about something. And then we meet Diane for the first time. I've got a few quotes written down from York. Good old Yorkie. And this certainly was one of them. So Diane's basically like quite a sexually powerful character. And she says, I could sleep with anyone I wanted to. I could have you, York, if I wanted you. And York, in a sort of very cool and sort of removed from the situation way, replies, you're the type of girl who someone in my job shouldn't get involved with. So there's a bit of a sort of standoff between these characters. So we get a sense of who Diane is as a character. Not a particularly well fleshed out one, but one nonetheless. And her alibi is that she was with Nick, one of the townsfolk, at the time of the murder. That's her alibi.
Wasn't there a scene at the end of it when you leave the museum and you see through the picture that she's talking to Forrest? Yeah,
no, right you are. So Forrest, yeah, he clocks that Forrest is there through the window. Still nothing at this point. I'm still thinking he's a bit of comic relief. But off the back of that, we go to a trip to the AG diner. We talk to Nick, not the most friendliest of characters, not very likeable.
Can't go to the kitchen. He kicks you out.
Yes. Did anybody ever get in the kitchen?
Well, I mean, you must be able to get in there because there are little medals, like collectible money tokens in there. So
it's probably something you have to you could probably break in at nighttime or something. There's probably something like a side quest the way you go in there at night or something.
But you're right, it's enticing, Neil. You think, I should be able to get in there. And he chats to you. He's not particularly giving of any information. And then you talk to Olivia, who asks you to meet her out the back after her shift, and find out that Olivia suspects Nick of cheating with Diane. And Nick's argument is that they're both, he and Diane are quite a meet up to talk about their mutual love of art. But it's obvious that there's a bit more going on behind the scenes here.
Well, then we get a call that we need to go to Becky's. And this is one of the points where when you're driving, one of the things we didn't talk about with the cars is that you can actually damage them and that gas goes down. And so for example, if you're doing an investigation and you run out of gas, you will actually get a game over.
Oh, will you?
Yes.
I forgot about that. I remember that.
Which this game depicts by not saying, like when you have a horrible death in this game, it doesn't say game over. It says
investigation failed.
Yeah. So you get an investigation failed.
Investigation failed. And game end, which is not two words anyone would put in that specific order. But yes, no, I didn't even realise that. That never sort of happened to me.
That happened to me once. So this is one of the nice points where you can actually drive to Becky's and you can drive with impunity.
And we get to Becky's house and we have another shadow sequence.
Yes.
I believe this is one of the shorter ones too. Like it's done really fast.
Yes, I was really thankful for that. The shadow sequences are weird as well because basically you're going through a known, I mean, this is very good for reusing assets, but you're going through a known environment that you see in the normal part of the day, but everything's covered in red vines and the sort of walls are created within one room by just having these sort of red sort of pathways, which is sort of puzzling you through. So we get through the shadow world sequence and then we find Becky in the bathroom tied again in that sort of Jesus cross formation with an intricate, nearly like saw-like contraption of ropes.
Yeah, a very Saw or even The Collector, which was like a similar booby trap movie setup.
And we have another scene that I think is really effective in the game where she can't talk, she's lost her tongue, you're trying to save her. George runs in with the others, with Thomas and Emily, and everyone's going, oh, don't cut the rope. Obviously, like, this is something awful that's going to happen. And George is just like straight in there, cutting that rope to try and save Becky, cuts the rope, and the ropes sort of tighten in such a way that causes Becky's demise.
Apparently, it's supposed to be like red velvet or something,
Yes.
like something,
And it strangles her. I thought this was a really good scene.
Yeah, it's definitely bizarre, horrifying.
Tense.
Or would have been horrifying if it was more graphic fidelity. But but still very intense, very, 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 like you said, very Saw-ish type of thing. Where it's like for the time, very a crazy little scene.
High drama without feeling too over the top.
Yes, and I really appreciated that. I wasn't like horrified in the way that I would be watching a Saw film. But yeah, you are feeling the drama of that. And you're like, oh, George, rushing in. She dies and she coughs up some of these red seeds that we've seen before. And luckily enough, she coughs off a key, which is very video gamey, which gives us access to her journal, which we use a pen to sort of scrape off the impressions of the last thing that was on the page and find that Becky has written a letter to her sister Diana saying she has fallen for the killer and she had followed him to the site where he had pinned Anna up and taken this sort of pendant from her hand.
And she gave it to Isaac and Isaiah.
And that leads us to meeting the boys. I think this is a good time to talk about the boys. How did you feel about the twins, Isaac and Isaiah?
They're fine. They're not... I like the fact that they weren't intentionally portrayed as creepy in the...
You don't think so?
Well,
No, I don't think that.
They creep the fuck out of me.
I thought they're just normal twin kids. I'm glad I didn't make them like extra annoying, like a lot of movies and games do with small children. They were like normal, 7-8-year-old kids.
Yes, I agree completely. Like I mean, when you see them in the Red World or whatever you want to call it, they're sort of weird and creepy, and it's a Twin Peaks type of thing. But when you see them with their grandfather, they're just playing. They're playing with the dog, or they're playing by themselves. They don't understand the concept of death. Like, they think Anna is a goddess in the forest. Like, they're normal 7-year-old children or 8-year-old children, however old they are.
Yes, in fact, sort of looking up the sort of more biblical sort of themes that are running for this game, I found that Isaac's name literally translates as "he will laugh," and Isaiah's name literally translates as "God saves." So they are kind of given this feeling that they can sort of access something that the sort of normal adults can't. They kind of see this sort of spiritual sort of side. Even when they're talking about Anna, they talk of her as like a fairy or goddess of the forest. But they are weird. I mean, you're not inviting them to your tea party, are you?
I don't think they're that weird. No.
I don't think they're... No, I agree with Tony.
I just think you have a thing against children.
The thing is, it could be that your perceptions are colored because you see them in the Red World first.
Yeah, the Red World, they're intentionally... They're weird, creepy, cryptics.
But I mean, also because it is that trope, it is like the twins in The Shining or whatever. You know, two young, twins. They're supposed to be a bit unsettling, at the very least, unsettling or unnerving.
I just saw innocence, and they're innocent.
That's the difference between me and you, Tony.
And innocent children, or young children, are usually the ones that because the old wives' tale is under younger kids. The children can see spirits, or more connected to the spiritual realm, and they can see the goddesses of each victim that got murdered. So I didn't find it out creepy.
So off the back of that, we go and see the twins and we find out that they had been given a box to give to Diane and a locket, a pendulum, which York surmises that Carol has taken, probably in that fight that we had overheard in the art gallery. And Kaysen sort of bops in as the sort of fun side character and goes, "Yep, I can confirm that." And that's when we sort of see that York had noticed him as a interesting character and asked him not to leave town. So off the back of that, do you want to continue from here?
No, this just leads to the stakeout.
The stakeout had a really sort of 80s, and again, I think that's sort of, you remember Driver, that sort of 80s crime cop robber sort of feel about it.
Yeah, so we have Thomas at the bar, which makes sense because his sister owns it, I think. And then Emily is watching Nick, and then George is at the art gallery.
Yes, and they're all trying to see if Nick is going to meet Diane at the bar or possibly go to her house. So she doesn't turn up at the bar, but Nick starts heading towards the art gallery, in which we enter the slowest chase scene in media history.
Something happened. I think it ended up failing because I think I went the wrong way or something. Or I went a little too fast.
Yes, you have to stay within a certain distance.
The cars already go slow as is, so I went a little bit fast and I got caught. I think I slammed the back of his car. I was like, God damn.
This is an unacceptably long scene, which basically entails you sort of feathering the R2. Is it R2 to drive? It probably isn't. That would make too much sense.
I think it's R2, yeah.
Yeah, basically feathering the R2 button for about what seems like 20 minutes as you're going through the map.
So, side note, you know what's worse? The cars in the PS3 version, they're kind of slow and kind of clunky, but they are easy to control. In the Switch version, which I played, they've switched it so that the cars are like turn on a hairpin. They're really hard to control.
Is that when you're pressing down the handbrake, they turn on a hairpin, or just generally?
Just generally.
Because here, at least on the director's cut version, if you touch the handbrake, you're doing a 180. It's
much worse. So I played the Switch version for this, and then when I went home for Thanksgiving, I went and played the director's cut version for comparison, and the handling of the cars, even in the cars from the General, are so much better in the PS3 version than the Switch version.
It's interesting you say that, because actually the first time I got into the car and started driving, I instantly thought, it's got a really good driving system implemented. But that's because you're kind of going at the speed where you can control it from the offset. And as soon as you get used to that, you're like, dear Lord, this is slow. Like, this is punishingly slow. So yeah, it's sad to hear in the Switch version, it's gone a little worse. But yeah, so we follow him for about 20 minutes. You have to make a swerve because a lorry comes along. So you lose him and you make your way to the art gallery where you meet George, who's been having a bit of a drink.
Funny that.
So a little unsettled by what was going on. He's had a drink, but he said Nick hasn't come through. But nonetheless, you look for a way to sort of enter the art gallery that maybe isn't the main entrance. And you find in a small shed a hole in the ground for which you can enter. And at this point, Emily comes up and says, just don't put yourself in too much danger, because I've now got a sort of a vested interest in, you and Zach, which is quite a sweet little moment. I think Emily's the only one to really reference Zach as a sort of second part of his personality. And she seems to care for them both, even at the sort of early point in the game.
So she says, don't put yourself into any danger. And then we get our introduction to the wall crawlers.
So
those are the ones that come up the vents, right?
Yes. So we go into another shadow sequence and we get the wall crawlers. At this point, I'm not so okay with the game. Much like the first time you go into the locker, I'm like, what I really hate, and it's so typical of horror games, is they say, here's a really horrible thing, like a horrible thing. And this girl, we talked about reasons why we've not played other horror games for this one. And then I saw basically the girl from The Ring coming at me in a very confined space. And I was very upset by that. How did you guys react to it?
I thought she was more annoying. I think it's probably the most difficult. It is the most difficult enemy in the game.
Agreed.
Only time I really use my shotgun besides at the end, the very end of the game where you just got hordes of enemies thrown at you, this is the only time. These are the only enemies where I actually use like my shotgun too, because I had to use my shotgun. Otherwise, I'd be frustrated.
Yes, I agree 100%. I always use the shotgun against these, and they go down in about 4 shots. And if you don't have the shotgun, it can be really frustrating.
I learned this far too late in the game. So yeah, I ran out of ammo. I used the shotgun. I was like, oh, that took about a third of the time.
I used my handgun like 90% of the game.
I remember playing this on the 360 and just hating these with the fiery passion of the sun.
Yes, I remember being a little more difficult on the 360. But like I said, in the director's cut, I've read that they kind of ease down the difficulty a little bit. Not like it's a difficult game to begin with, but I remember them being a little bit more annoying or a little more tougher in the 360 version than in director's cut.
I think that's something to bring up here. In fact, in the original Xbox 360 version, they did have different difficulty levels, and they've taken that out for the director's cut and put one standard difficulty, which from reading sounds like it's easier than even the easiest difficulty on the Xbox 360. I wasn't upset by that because the combat is not what you're coming to this game for, is it?
No.
And the fact that, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but you can aim with L1, you can auto lock with R2, and you can shoot with R1. And basically it was aim, auto lock, shoot for most of this game.
I never even knew the auto lock. I always just aimed.
It's so bad, the aiming.
Apparently aiming is improved from the 360 version too, from what I understand.
That seems impossible because the aiming in this game, it's like they said, can we do the aiming in GTA 3 but even worse? And they really achieved that.
I didn't think it was bad at all. But then again, I'm pretty used to playing low bar spectrum horror games with bad aiming, and this was all right, I thought.
Okay.
Apparently, it is in the PS3 version is move support, which I wasn't able to use, unfortunately, and I would have loved to see how that would have turned out.
It's one of those rare occasions where I think probably the move would have been a vast improvement because I found the aiming really jank. There's a few boss fights we're going to come to later when you have to use manual aiming. And I was very upset by that because I'd spent the whole game auto aiming.
I did not even know there was auto aiming. Does the game tell you there's auto aiming? Because I didn't even notice it.
It does right at the beginning, but it's like...
Does it?
As soon as it's telling you how to aim and like do like 3 other things at once. Guess easy to skip.
I had no problem with regular aiming, so I didn't even pay attention to it.
That's why you're the one and only Tony. What about you, Neal? Were you auto or manual?
The PS3 version... I do remember using the auto aim, but I mean, I don't find the manual aiming that bad because you have a target that basically tells you where you're aiming, so you can move the control sticks to sort of go for a headshot.
Yes.
Anyway, so it's. Is
there a difference between headshots and body shots in here? Because the auto aiming gives you the worst shot. It's like a midriff shot.
The headshots, I think, gives you like bonuses.
Okay.
And I think it kills them quicker. Okay.
I did wonder that, but the pain of actually having to manually aim seemed not worth it.
I thought the aiming was fine. The aiming was I've used a lot. I've aimed a lot. I've aimed a lot. I've aimed a lot worse.
I've aimed a lot in my life.
Another thing, I've experienced a lot worse aiming mechanics in other games, so I thought this was all right, acceptable rather.
How about you now? How did you find the controls?
Well, like I said, I was playing through this on the Switch this time.
Portable or docked?
No, docked. But I was using a classic controller, and I had almost no problems aiming.
I would have loved to try the move out. Unfortunately, I didn't dust those off for this game. But yes, so that is... and to be honest, also, when I saw the ring-like girl, I thought, oh, they've added a new mechanic. I literally thought I'd seen every gameplay Shadow World mechanic at this point, and that gave me hope that actually there might be some progression. Hope which was squashed horribly. But we'll go on to that. So we get through the Shadow World. We see sort of more representations of like seeds and the red trees. We come back to the atrium to find an unconscious Nick and a Diane who is placed atop this massive art piece. So in the atrium, there's this massive art piece, which I didn't clock in the normal world, but in the sort of shadow world, at least in this sequence, it's very obvious that it's sort of taken on the sort of shape of the red tree. She's atop it, sort of strung, balancing on top, and York tries to save her as a sort of heroic jump, takes her to the ground.
When you watch the intro scene where the boys find the body of Anna, you see a glimpse of Diane in the art gallery with that red tree at the beginning of the game.
Well, the red tree from the gallery.
Yes, that sculpture. Right at the beginning of the game, when you see that intro, when the body is discovered, you see Diane in the gallery with that red tree sculpture.
Oh, see, that's nice. That's quite nice. So you dive. Also, at this point, George is like trying to like hold the red tree.
No, he's trying to push it, and he's like breaking the.
Oh yes, to try and stop Dan falling. His scar kind of splits in the middle of his cheek. You manage to save Diane by sort of throwing her to the ground. Do you want to talk us through what happens after that, Neal?
So Diane gets up after she's rescued, and she gives an art show describing the tree, but she does it with no tongue, and it's really creepy.
Yeah, she's like a bit possessed by this point.
I thought that scene was hilarious. She's just talking, there's like blood splattering everywhere, and this is so beautiful. I thought it was hilarious. I was cracking up when I first saw that back in the day, when I first played it. I thought it was hilarious. It's very campy, what I would expect from this type of game.
Again, probably not what they're going for, but there is a definite charm to it.
I think that was intent, because you think she's dead, and I thought she was dead, and she gets up and she just starts talking. This is so beautiful. Oh my God, look what there's edges, and you see this shit flying out her mouth. And I thought it was hilarious, and like in the best way possible.
That was one of the parts that creeped me out a bit, because you know that she has no tongue, and you know what's happened, and it's just everything seems a little bit askew. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, it is. It is unsettling.
So then,
my morbid sense of humor.
Yeah. George arrests Nick for attempted murder, and then George tries to sort of fight back, and Nick pushes George into the sculpture, which causes the sculpture to fall. York leaps to rescue Emily and Diane, who are standing together.
Emily was trying to pull her away, and Diane was refusing to budge.
Yeah,
she doesn't want to die. She doesn't want to be saved.
So Diane is turned into a pancake, basically. And then at that point, Willie shows up out of nowhere and takes York to another part of the art gallery with a sort of locked containment area. And Kaysen comes out of this, and he explains that he and Diane had been involved and tangled romantically. Diane had locked him in there, and he was waiting to get released.
So just as Nick arrives to the art gallery this evening, Kaysen is with Diane, and Diane locks Kaysen quickly in a hurried manner into this underground sort of secure place.
Yes, so he heard a man's boots. Obviously, he's talking about Nick. Nick claims he was knocked unconscious, so they take Nick in for questioning, I think. And then,
yes, and also Kaysen is immediately suspected by York at this point. You know, you're turning up a lot in these sort of very important places, and Kaysen's like, I'm locked in here from the outside. There's only one way that could happen, is if Diane had locked me in here, to kind of relieve this responsibility of being a part of the crime.
But didn't George arrive at the scene first, if I recall correctly?
Yes, so he was the watch at the gallery.
And then it just so happens that she's strung up there over the sculpture. It's a lot of hindsight. There's a lot of hints.
I was going to say, who's clocking that from the first part? Maybe Neal. Not many of us have.
She's the first one to. He was the one that cut the wire. It's just a lot of little subtle details.
Yeah. So Nick's taken into custody, and that's when we get our next scene. After this sort of traumatic scene, yeah, George invites us to the bar. I think this is another one of those really sort of heartfelt moments.
It is a nice moment between George and York.
Yes, and George really opens up. He's feeling incredibly upset, like a personal responsibility about this sort of third victim. I'm feeling a responsibility for their deaths. He also goes into his quite abusive relationship with his mother as a child. George explains that he's got quite an abusive relationship with his mother as a child, and that his mother would actually stamp on him and used to whip him with like literally branches from the tree. So much so, and this is a really sort of quite poignant moment where George felt so responsible for this. I think his mother would say that this is hurting the trees more than it's hurting you. And he said that he'd actually go to the forest and apologise to the trees. That's quite sad. That's like quite a heavy moment.
Yes. So we learn where George got his scars. We learn about George's psyche a little bit. I mean, this is a giant flashing clue.
It's a giant flashing clue, and it's also some quite good character development in the game.
It is.
Yeah, he actually really opens up to York and becomes like a more of a friend and like just someone he has to deal with.
I started actually literally becoming very invested in these characters, which is something I didn't foresee at the beginning of this game for certain.
Well, it's a nice moment because so much of the beginning of the game, there's tension between them. There's the tension of who's in charge of the investigation, and then York takes over. At one point, he insists the FBI is taking over in the investigation. George starts to resent that. And then there's points, I think, like when you get the car delivered, he refers to him as King George. So there's all this animosity at the beginning of the game. And then we get to this, and we actually see them start to have character development and start to bond. So it is really nice to see that at this point in the game.
Yes, and it's a nice sort of tension release from all these sort of shadow world moments. At this point, I'm seeing, it's like the vegetables thing. I'm going, you've got to get through these sort of shadow sequences that are quite awkward and not particularly enjoyable gameplay wise to get to these sort of fantastic story beats.
Another little Twin Peaks kind of reference to, I think there's a bar that everyone went to called the Roadhouse, and there's another bar that everyone goes to and watches musical performances.
Yes, and it is very much that sort of bar. So Carol was the singer of this bar, has these sort of, how would you describe Carol's music? She's doing these sort of very powerful female vocal. Very
like seductress kind of like oldies, like old-timey, not old-timey, but like
awful. I hated this song.
Originally, there was a different song in Rainy Woods for this scene, but for whatever reason, they changed it. And the other song is actually, from what I recall, is a little better.
It is a little better, and I prefer the Rainy Wood song because the one they use in Deadly Premonition is terrible.
I see what they're going for. It's this sort of really strong female vocal.
Yeah, very like jazzy kind of burlesque, not burlesque, but you know.
Yeah, no, I certainly get what you mean. And we talked to Carol and about the pendulum, and she's quite evasive about it. And then we go back to George, and that's where Emily meets us. Emily is in what can only describe as sort of like a green prom dress, a very glowing. It's not how we've seen her before. She's, you know, in the old sheriff's deputy uniform. She's all very sort of practical. York even says to Zach at this point, Emily looks like one of the goddess of the forests. And then George awkwardly leaves at this point. He's like, I've had my man-to-man, so I'm going to leave. And I think that's when Emily opens up and says that when she first came to this town, this small town, she was a high schooler and George fancied her then, which is a bit pervy. So Emily says that he had fancied her when she had first come to this town, and she had rejected his advances. And then you think that's probably the end of the episode, but you go back to your hotel and who comes knocking on the door? It's Emily. At this point you're thinking maybe something's, yeah. For lack of better words, maybe Emily is invested in him as a character more than just an FBI agent. But this is a quite telling bit where York opens up and talks about his relationship with his parents.
He talks about his father. He talks about how his father was one of the first to use the criminal profiling that he uses now.
I was just going to say, which is a weird juxtaposition, because this whole game, he's very much about, I'm very clinical, I use this profiling, it's very efficient, it's sort of what works in a job like he has in the FBI. But that's sort of mixed with him listening to his coffee. So that's a weird sort of juxtaposition that goes throughout the game. But yes, sorry, he goes on to talk about his this one moment where he's remembering a scene with his father. We get this flashback of his father, who's kind of like shaded from the top half of his face, pointing a gun at his mother, and he stumbles down the stairs and sort of sees the scene, and that gives him a kind of a very visceral reaction. And he gets a bit hazy on the details after that, but that's when he first mentions meeting Zach.
And he mentions that he witnessed his father kill his mother. Presumably. He mentions to Emily that he presumably watched his father brutally murder his mother and then himself. And then Diane replies, I'm sure you had a good reason, which, okay. Hindsight, yes, there was definitely a good reason. But I was just like, holy shit, lady.
Yeah, at this point in the game, you're like, did he... How is that your initial reaction to hearing someone say that their father killed their mother?
York was like, yeah, you might be right. I'm like, really? Not cool, Emily. Like, read the room.
That is literally the definition of giving the benefit of the doubt.
I think she was just... They're having a moment where they're bonding and she's just trying to comfort him. And it's the only thing she can think of to say.
I understand that. Like, I got that. But still, though, it's not like, oh, blah, blah, blah. It's like, my dad shot my mom, shot myself. Oh, I'm sure there's a perfectly good reason that you're an orphan now. Like, what the fuck, lady? That was my reaction.
The implication here is that he has created this sort of imaginary friend or this sort of second personality as a way to sort of cope with these traumatic events.
Yeah.
Yes. And then Emily leaves and York says one of his fantastic quotes, which is talking about when he saw their backs earlier in the day and just commenting on how sort of sad and nostalgic that made him feel.
So we missed one thing, which is within the original game, this is the first time that we hear the quote of, at times we should purge things from this world that should not exist, even if it means losing someone that you love.
Oh, so does that only happen for the first time in the original?
Yes.
At this point in the game?
Yeah.
Okay.
The first time you hear it is when he's telling a story to Emily about the death of his parents.
Okay. So you're starting to see this as a recurring theme at this point in the director's cut.
I think just before the end of episode 2, we flash to an episode of Carol, who is being consoled by a figure in a dungeon with a locket. So I wanted to ask Jamie, did you know who this character was?
I did, because I watched an IGN YouTube review of this game, and one moment they did show actually was the moment where Thomas hits York over the head, which is terrible for a review to give that away.
I always thought it was very obvious that it was, what was his name? Thomas and his sister in the little sex dungeon.
Had I not seen, I would not have clocked that on my initial playthrough, to be honest.
That's what I wanted to ask you, okay?
Yeah, no, I would have been naive of that. And so that opens up episode 3, where we go back into some nice Animal Crossing music and we're having breakfast in Polly's hotel. So we get to episode 3 where we're back in the hotel with Polly and he's got his famous cup of coffee and he's reading an ad and he deciphers the message, hurry Harry, or meet hurry Harry.
It's like capital letters for this like ad for some store, and then he puts his cup down and a ring around it, and it goes down the word, like each of the capital letter words is Harry. It says hurry to Harry.
The coffee's showing us the narrative once again.
He jets out of there, and Ollie's like, you forgot your coffee!
Which is important. And at that point, we meet Emily, who says Thomas has gone missing. At this point, I'm thinking, I've clocked it. I clocked it early on. It's Thomas. He's gone missing. But I'm also thinking this is episode 3 and we've got 3 more episodes to go. Is this going to be the genuine answer? So we go to Harry's mansion and we get some puzzles here. Again, the puzzles aren't so challenging.
No, they're not terrible.
They're not terrible. They're not terribly difficult. I would argue they are terrible.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the puzzles are for this one, to be honest.
That's how insignificant they are. There's a lot of like statues, you're moving things around, or like ones with umbrellas. But every time you go to Harry's, you got to solve a very obvious puzzle.
Oh, I do remember that. I remember that. I think I kind of got confused at first, and then I realized what I had to do.
And we meet Harry, and he invites us for tea because sometimes coffee is not always appropriate.
I don't drink coffee. I drink tea.
There you go. And he says, I insist you must have some sugar. And we open the sugar bowl, and lo and behold, lots of these red seeds that has been a sort of a through line of the game come out. And York's like, all right, you've got my attention. And Harry sends us on a fetch quest. He says there's a certain part in this town where these red seeds are abundant. They're in the graveyard. So go to the graveyard and bring me back some seeds, and I'll give you some more information.
This is where we meet Brian, isn't it?
We meet Brian. Well, we've met Brian at the town set at the town.
You met him at the town meeting.
Community centre, yes.
But this is where we talk to him, isn't it?
Yeah, I love Brian. He plays such a small role. I'm sure he has a side quest, but in the main story, he plays such a small role, and he does it fantastic. Brian is like a sort of 90s goth.
Yeah. Very like Morrissey kind of.
No,
feel.
you know who he reminds me of is Noah Fielding.
No, he does, yes. Brian is Noel Fielding, who for maybe some American listeners might not recognise so much, but it's all very more morbid, glib humour. He's very pale white. He's called Brian the Insomniac. Very funny for a graveskeeper, obviously. And you sort of go through this sort of small zombie section where you find these red seeds and you fetch them back to Harry. Another little puzzle. And then Harry starts to uncover a bit more detail.
Well, you go back to Harry's mansion, and Harry, at this point, reveals the story of the clock tower and the original Raincoat Killer.
Does he do that? He only gives a bit of that, doesn't he?
Well, he says there's no record, but the military covered it up because he was there. 10 to 20 years ago, a new legend started. Eating the red seeds and killing someone makes you immortal. And then and then he tells you the records of the original Raincoat Killer exist at the sheriff's office. And that's when you go back.
Yes, so we go back to the sheriff's office, trying to find these records, and we enter another Shadow World sequence. At this point, I'm realizing that the Shadow World sequences, much like the sort of gestures, they're just an RPG element. They're really heavily reminding me of a RPG where you're basically going into a dungeon section.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
And who's going to an RPG for the dungeon sections? Like, they are kind of important to give some friction within the game and some sort of technical ability. Maybe not so much in this game, but as soon as I started viewing them as dungeon sections, I stopped hating them so much. I was like, we're getting through this. And we go to the sheriff's office.
I've got a comparison for you. So this is not going to make sense to you because you haven't played it, but they are the temple sections in Final Fantasy X when Yuna goes to get the.
Oh yeah.
When Yuna goes to get the summon and you have to go in the temple and solve the puzzle. That's what they remind me of.
Kind of, only without the puzzle.
It will make sense to people who have played Final Fantasy X, but not to you.
So yes, we go through the sheriff's office underworld section only to find that someone has gotten to the records before us.
I was just going to ask you, because I remember going through the section and I was playing this time and I remembered there being stuff in those shelves that you can bring out.
They have what you have in like archive libraries where you kind of like unwind this thing and the wall comes
yes.
out.
So I was going through all of that, trying to find stuff and remembering, like, I remembered that there were undead creatures in some of them, and I couldn't remember which ones. So I was, like, immediately tense as soon as I pressed the button for every one of them.
I can admit that the first time a zombie came out, I got a jump scare, but not just because it happened, but because also the controls are so awkward that it was really hard to shoot them from up close.
You just back up and shoot them. I never had any problem shooting anything really in this game, minus the bosses, which we'll get to a little later.
That totally freaked me out. Yes, so we get through the underworld section. To be honest, actually, that bit where you are like taking these shelves out is actually quite an awkward, eerie moment, because also there's a ladder leading down to sort of another section.
Yeah,
and I generally got the chills at this point, probably more so than most points in the game. Tony's looking at me like I'm.
Hey, to each their own.
I'm glad we didn't pick Resident Evil 7 at this point.
We
do another few ring girls, I imagine. I think that's sort of what happens here.
Yeah. I think you fight a few more of those of your favorite enemy type in the game.
At no point to this point in the story is that explained why there are sort of these sort of zombie-like creatures. We get through and back into the normal world, where we say, look, these documents have been taken. Who has access to these documents other than, obviously, Emily and George? To which George replies, Thomas.
Actually, I have George, York, and Emily all agree it could have been Thomas.
Yes, yeah, at this point, everything's leading to Thomas. And Emily whips up York a cup of coffee at this point.
Yes, York asks Emily for a cup of coffee so he can concentrate, and the cup catches his eye.
Not only that, but this cup of coffee seems orgasmic to York. I've never seen such a reaction to a cup of coffee. He is like, oh my God, this coffee. I think he's in love at this point.
There's another point in the game where he mentions like a sandwich or some sort of cooking that Emily does.
There's a turkey sandwich that Harry orders at the restaurant quite early on in the game. And York goes, that's a weird looking sandwich, but I'll have the same. And it's like this incredible thing, this sort of weird. Have you also seen the have you also seen the image of this turkey sandwich, this delicious sandwich? A lot of the items in this game, I'm not touching. Some weird choices for the food items.
Yeah, what is in that sandwich that Harry ordered? It's like,
there's some Black Death, I think. Some of the plague is in there.
It was a weird concoction of a sandwich. I cannot remember what it was.
It's got jam in it. It's got a few elements.
Like jam and like gravy or something.
Yeah. But he has this coffee from Emily. He's as happy as Christmas, but he does notice this mug. What happens from there?
Does he also criticize the coffee? Like, this coffee's disgusting or something like that. Like,
I think that's another coffee in the game he's criticizing. This coffee is hitting the spot for him. To say the least. Well, I think he's found his future partner.
Yes, and it gives him inspiration to go look for the documents.
So on the mug itself shows a particular waterfall or a river reservoir.
That's right.
From the town. And York, as well as being a very clinically technical man profiling his cases, likes to take investigating clues from his cups of coffee and goes, we should probably check out that reservoir of water. And that leads us to the fishing segment.
Oh my God, the fishing segment.
Now,
the forced fishing segment. It was funny because I hadn't played this game in so long, and I remembered that there was fishing, and I was like, why didn't I do the fishing in the game before? And then I got to this section, and I was like, oh yeah, it forces you to fish, and it fucking sucks.
I mean, I've played the fishing in Yakuza, and that's even better than this.
Hey, leave Yakuza out of this.
What fishing is there in Yakuza? Wait. What fishing is there in Yakuza?
You can fish in Yakuza. Didn't you know that?
Which game?
I mean, definitely 0. So I'm imagining most of the ones
I haven't. I've only played 1 and 2.
Okay, side point. Play 0. It's amazing.
I played the original 1 and 2 and Kiwami 1 and 2. I've never played 0.
Play 0, please. It hurts me you haven't. So we eventually find these documents, and they're quite interesting. They have a ritual attached to them. Neal, would you like to talk to us about the ritual of the Raincoat killings?
He catches the documents which reveal the requirements for immortality. So step 1, make 4 human sacrifices on rainy nights. Number 2, make sure the sacrifices eat the red seeds before they die. Step 3, they must not speak if they are killed.
Which explains our cutting of the tongue It doesn't just need a passionate man to make, because I think York has initially profiled the killer as maybe having sort of troubles with women, basically. Oh, and step 4 is eating the seeds yourself. So we glean this information, we find the documents, and we're off to Harry's for another fun puzzle.
So we see these documents, and George recognizes the handwriting of these steps as Thomas's.
Convenient. I mean, the first time you played this game, at this point, are you thinking, we've got him?
I still suspected FK.
I'm just like, at that point, I was just along for the ride.
You're like, whatever happens.
Wherever this game takes me, I'm all in.
But importantly, we've got these documents, and that's going to give us more information from Harry. So we go back to Harry's, we go through another sort of shadow world sequence, which is thankfully very short.
This is where we find the painting of the goddesses, and we find the painting also includes Thomas, Carol, and Emily.
Suspicious. I think York at one point notes, there's not many young, attractive females in this small town, and Emily is one of them. So he's already worried about Emily, and now we see this painting, Emily's in it, as well as Thomas. And
like
Carol.
Half the town's in that painting, because there's only like 10 people in the entire town. And half of them have been murdered.
Yeah, so we fight our way through a shadow sequence, and then we find ourselves back at good old Harry's secret underground base.
I called it Harry's Batcave.
There's something very James Bond about this place, isn't there? And it seems that Harry values information a lot. He's got all this power, he's got all this money, but actually it's sort of information that he seems as a valuable commodity. And he then proceeds to tell us, we go to a flashback, and he proceeds to tell us what happened 50 years ago in the town.
So he tells us the story of the opening of the clock tower. And at that point, he was very young. He climbed it because he wanted to, I guess.
Yes, he has this innate urge to climb this clock tower without understanding why. Convenient.
He sees the army releasing the purple gas, and we see a very familiar silhouette in the cutscene.
At this point, not familiar to me.
He sees the effect that it has on the town. He sees the Raincoat Killer. He realizes that it's his father that is the Raincoat Killer. He gets affected by the gas.
At this point, the townspeople have become murderous because of this purple gas. They're literally attacking each other on the streets. And Harry himself has inhaled this gas and has had the same urge, and sees this one domineering character in this raincoat and goes to attack him.
Yes, he attacks this character. He's knocked unconscious, but he survives.
But he also recognizes this character as his father.
There's speculation, it's never confirmed, but there's speculation that he could have been put in the wheelchair from the attack from his father.
That makes a lot of sense. He takes a bit of a blow. I mean, he lands on a rock.
Yes, so it's not confirmed, but it could be. The military arrives. They put a gag order on everyone. This never happened. This incident doesn't exist. But the gas is seeped into the soil, and rain causes small amounts of the gas to release, which affects the townspeople. He believes there's a connection between the gas and the red seeds. As not Harry is leaving, as York is leaving, Harry recites his father's line about purging and someone you love, etc., etc.
He also explains that this is why, even though there was a gag order on the town, perhaps the town have created this folklore of not going out when it rains,
right,
which kind of protects them from going out when it rains and the rain hits the soil, releasing this sort of gas and sort of causing problems for the town.
And then, so at this point, he's on his way out from Harry's, and he gets an order that Thomas has been found.
And it's not just an order, it's a huge thing on the screen that says alert or something that is scrolling everywhere.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, so Harry has tapped into the police system because he is all-knowing and realizes that Thomas has been found. And I think that is where we leave episode 3.
So that unfortunately takes us to the end of episode 2 of our Deadly Premonition discussion. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you would like to either comment on your love for the game itself, or comment on our lovely voices, Tony will tell you all of the details about how to get in contact with us. Tony?
Hey there. Did you enjoy the podcast? Francis York Morgan was able to find answers to his questions in his coffee. Well, you might not be able to find any answers to any questions with us, but be sure to follow us on Twitter at PSRumble and email us at psrumblepodcasts@gmail.com. Come on, let's be friends. So says Mr. Stewart.
And thank you again for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye, guys.
Bye. Is there a difference between headshots and body shots in here? Because the auto aiming gives you the worst shot. It's like a midriff shot.
I think headshots, you get, I'm sorry, Neal. You do the headshot? Ugh, what am I doing this shit? The headshots.
Do it again. Do it one more time.
Okay, go, Tony.
Hey, welcome to
The
our
headshots,
first podcast.
Stop it.